It started like any ordinary morning inside the crowded train station. Travelers hurried past, the loudspeakers echoed overhead, and the rhythmic blend of footsteps and rolling suitcases filled the air. Nothing seemed unusual until Rex the police dog suddenly stopped mid-stride. His ears twitched, his body stiffened, and his sharp amber eyes locked onto a little girl holding her mother's hand. To everyone else, she looked like just another child in the rush of the morning crowd. But Rex saw something no one else noticed. The girl's trembling fingers tapped softly 5 quick taps against her mother's back, repeating the strange pattern again and again. No one paid attention. No one except Rex. In a split second, he broke formation, pulling hard on his leash toward the child. His handler, Officer Mark, struggled to hold him back. "Easy, boy." "What is it?" he muttered, baffled by the dog's sudden urgency. What Rex sensed that morning would soon shake the entire station to its core. Stay with us until the very end, because what happens next will leave you absolutely speechless. Before we dive deeper, don't forget to hit like, share, and subscribe to support the channel. This channel is still very new, and we're trying to reach our first 1,000 subscribers, a small milestone, but a very meaningful one for us. If you'd like to support the channel, so stories like this can keep coming, please consider subscribing. Just one click truly makes a huge difference. And hey, I'm genuinely curious, where are you watching from? Drop your country down in the comments. I love seeing how far our stories travel. The morning rush inside Central Station was unfolding in full force, a restless tide of travelers weaving through marble floors, polished by years of footsteps. Voices blended together into a steady hum, punctuated by distant announcements bouncing off the high-arched ceilings. Amid that familiar chaos, Officer Mark adjusted the brim of his uniform cap and walked with practiced ease beside his K9 partner Rex. Rex, a disciplined German shepherd with a powerful build and sharp amber eyes, moved with silent precision. His vest, stamped boldly with the word "Police," glinted whenever overhead lights caught it. Though many passengers smiled at the pair, even taking quick photos as they passed, Rex remained focused, scanning faces and luggage with the instinctive awareness only a seasoned K9 could possess. Mark and Rex had worked side by side for over 5 years. Their partnership had been forged through long patrols, tense confrontations, and moments when a split-second decision made the difference between danger and safety. Mark trusted the dog more deeply than he trusted most people. Rex had never failed him, not once. It was supposed to be another routine shift, just the usual travelers hurrying to work, tourists dragging suitcases, parents guiding children through the maze of platforms. Nothing appeared out of place. Still, Mark kept his senses sharp. Experience had carved one lesson deep into him: danger rarely made an announcement. It hid in the quiet details: an abandoned bag, a nervous glance, a gesture that didn't quite fit. Rex paused near a row of benches, sniffing the air with slow, deliberate movements. His tail swayed lazily, signaling nothing unusual. Mark allowed him a moment before giving a gentle tug on the leash. "Come on, buddy. Another peaceful morning, right?" he murmured. But Rex didn't respond with his usual calm glance or flick of the ear. Instead, his eyes drifted toward the crowd, tracking something unseen. Mark followed his line of sight, but saw nothing alarming, just a blur of commuters shifting in and out of focus. Somewhere within that ordinary morning rhythm, something small was beginning to change. Mark didn't know it yet, but Rex had already sensed the subtle disturbance rippling through the crowd, a disturbance that would soon pull them into a moment neither of them would ever forget. The crowd surged as the next announcement crackled through the speakers, urging passengers to move toward their platforms. The station felt even more alive now. Voices overlapping, luggage wheels rattling, hurried footsteps, merging into a restless rhythm. Mark guided Rex through the flow of travelers, with quiet control eyes, shifting from face to face, scanning for anything out of place. Rex walked faithfully at his side, posture alert, but calm, his head tilting slightly as he surveyed each passerby. Near the main security checkpoint, a splash of color caught Mark's attention, a woman in a bright blue coat, weaving through the crowd, holding the hands of 3 children. Something about the scene seemed perfectly ordinary. At first, a mother traveling with her kids moving quickly to catch a train. But as Mark watched her more closely, he sensed a subtle tension in the way she walked, like someone trying to get somewhere without being noticed. Her posture was too rigid, her smile too carefully placed. It was the smallest child who truly drew his attention. A little girl with soft, light brown hair falling over her face as she struggled to keep up. Her small hand was tightly wrapped in the woman's grip, but her steps were uneven, hesitant. She kept glancing around, eyes darting across the crowded terminal, as though searching for something or someone to help her. There was fear in those eyes. Fear hidden behind silence. Rex sensed it before Mark did. The dog's ears twitched sharply then again. His steady stride began to slow, muscles shifting beneath his black and tan coat. Mark immediately felt the change through the leash, subtle but unmistakable. Rex never altered behavior without reason. "What is it, boy?" Mark whispered under his breath. Rex didn't bark, didn't growl. He simply stared, locked completely onto the little girl. Mark followed Rex's line of sight and spotted her again. She had fallen a step behind the woman, now almost slipping from her grip before being yanked closer. The movement wasn't one of gentle correction. It was a pull of warning, almost impatience. The girl stumbled, but didn't protest. She just lowered her head and kept walking, her shoulders trembling with each step. Mark's instincts nudged him hard. He had seen fear manifest in 100 different ways. And this wasn't shyness or tiredness. It was the kind of fear that made children quiet. Too quiet. Rex took another slow step forward, his tail stiffening. The leash tightened in Mark's hand. "Easy." Mark murmured again. But the dog didn't break focus. His gaze stayed locked on the girl, his senses zeroing in on something invisible to everyone else. The family reached the waiting area near the ticket gates. The woman hurried, almost dragging the children along. The girl lagged again. Her small fingers trembled as they brushed against the woman's back. And then Mark saw it. 5 taps. A pause. 5 taps again. Barely noticeable in the chaos around them, but patterned, intentional. Rex stiffened. A low, quiet growl rumbled deep in his throat. Not aggressive, but alert, urgent. "Sure." Mark narrowed his eyes. His pulse quickened. "What are you seeing, partner?" he whispered. He replayed the gesture in his mind. 5 taps. A coded signal. A cry for help. His years on the force had taught him to pay attention to the tiniest details. Victims often sent silent messages when they couldn't speak. And this child, she wasn't just scared. She was communicating. The crowd flowed around them, oblivious. A businessman rushed past with coffee. A couple argued about directions. A toddler laughed as he chased a balloon. Life carried on with the careless energy of a busy morning, unaware that something far darker was beginning to unfold. Rex's growl deepened. Mark felt the vibration of it through the leash, a tremor of instinct warning him not to look away. At that moment, the girl turned. Their eyes met. It was only a second. A single, fleeting second. But her expression said everything. Wide, glassy fear. Lips pressed shut to keep from trembling. A look that wasn't just searching, it was pleading. Mark's breath hitched. Before he could move, the woman tugged her sharply, forcing her to turn away. The girl lowered her gaze again, hiding her expression beneath a curtain of hair. Rex barked once sharp, commanding. Several people turned their heads. The woman flinched. Mark tightened his grip on the leash, his heartbeat thudding in his ears. Rex didn't bark without intention. ever. He watched as the family approached the ticket barrier. The woman's steps grew quicker. Her smile, when she briefly flashed it at a ticket clerk, looked forced, almost brittle. She kept adjusting her bag, pulling her coat tighter, glancing back over her shoulder, as though someone might be watching. The girl stumbled once more. This time, she nearly fell. But the woman didn't comfort her. She didn't slow down. She just pulled harder. That was the moment everything changed. Rex barked again, louder, sharper, charged with purpose. The little girl didn't shrink in fear at the sound. She didn't cry or hide behind the woman. She looked back at Rex, and her lips moved silently. 2 words. Help us. Mark felt the ground shift beneath him. The noise of the station faded into a dull hum. The only thing that mattered now was the trembling child and the dog who had understood her before any human could. Something was very wrong, and it was only the beginning. The atmosphere inside the terminal began to shift, almost imperceptibly. At first, a thinning of noise, a subtle tightening of space around them. Mark felt it the way trained officers do, a tension that rises before a storm breaks. Rex stood firm at his side, muscles coiled with an intensity Mark had rarely seen from him without clear provocation. His gaze never wavered from the woman in the blue coat and the trembling little girl beside her. Rex heel Mark commanded softly. But Rex didn't budge. His ears flattened, tail stiffened, and a deep growl vibrated from his chest, low, controlled, but unmistakably a warning. It wasn't directed at danger the way he would growl at explosives or a weapon. It was directed at something far more human. The woman froze. Her fingers tightened painfully around the little girl's arm. She spun around abruptly, her face twisted with a strange mix of fear and forced calm. "Officer," she called out, her voice slightly elevated. "Is there a problem?" "Why is your dog doing that?" Mark held her gaze, reading every flicker in her expression. "Ma'am," he answered evenly. "My K9 partner is responding to something. He doesn't usually do that unless there's a reason." Around them, travelers slowed down. Some lowered their voices. Others pulled out their phones, recording from a distance. The hum of the terminal shifted from casual background chatter to an uneasy murmur. The girl flinched as Rex barked again, but what struck Mark wasn't her reaction, it was the look in her eyes. She didn't seem scared of Rex. She seemed relieved that someone, anyone, had finally noticed her silent cry. Ma'am, Mark continued, stepping forward with calm authority. "I'm going to need to speak with you for a moment." The woman's posture stiffened. "We're late for our train," she snapped just a little too quickly. "My kids are tired. We just want to leave." Her voice trembled at the edges. Rex suddenly leaned forward, pulling the leash taut. Mark braced himself, planting his feet firmly. "Rex," he ordered again, but the dog wasn't acting out of disobedience. His instincts, razor-sharp and deeply honed, were screaming a message Mark couldn't ignore. The little girl gasped softly as the woman jerked her arm. Mark noticed the subtle wince she tried to hide. His heartbeat kicked harder. "Ma'am," he said, voice firm now, "I need you to stop." The woman's eyes darted toward the exit, toward the crowd, toward any possible escape route. Panic flickered across her face. She adjusted her bag again, clutching it like a shield. "We haven't done anything wrong," she said shakily. "Why are you targeting us?" Before Mark could respond, Rex barked, loud, explosive, echoing off the walls of the terminal. The little girl jolted, not in fear, but in anticipation, as though that bark meant something she desperately needed to hear. Her lips moved again. "Help us." Mark lowered himself slightly, trying to meet her eyes without spooking her. "Sweetheart," he began, gently. "Are you?" "Don't talk to her," the woman snapped, stepping between them. Her arm shot out protectively, but not in the way mothers protect their children. It was possessive, controlling, fearful. Rex growled, stepping forward. The woman backed up instinctively. "Control your dog," she shouted. Mark raised a calming hand toward the onlookers who had begun crowding around. His other hand hovered near his duty belt. Not his weapon, just grounding himself in readiness. "I'm asking you one more time," he said, steadily. "Let go of her hand." "No," the woman breathed. Her voice cracked, barely audible over the murmurs. The girl looked up at Mark again. Tears pooled in her eyes, clinging to her lashes, until one finally rolled down her cheek. Her tiny fingers loosened around her stuffed toy, trembling violently. Rex's whine cut through the tension, a sound Mark had rarely heard in the field. A sound not of aggression, but empathy. "That was enough," Ma'am Mark said quietly but firmly. "I need you to open your bag. Right now." The woman's breath hitched. Her hand clutched the strap so tightly her knuckles blanched white. "What?" "No," she stammered. "You have no right," Rex barked again, startling several people nearby. Coffee cups rattled. Someone screamed. A baby began to cry. The woman flinched violently. Mark took one decisive step forward, his voice sharpened by experience. "Ma'am, put the bag down." She didn't. Her eyes flicked rapidly between Mark, Rex, and the exit. Her breathing grew shallow. Sweat glistened at her temples. Rex growled a low, guttural rumble and stepped closer, his body forming a protective barrier between Mark and the family. Then everything happened at once. The woman spun around, dragging the little girl with her, shoving through the startled crowd as she tried to escape. "Rex, Mark," shouted. The German Shepherd launched forward, cutting off her path with surgical precision. He didn't bite. He didn't attack. He simply planted himself in front of her, barking thunderously, forcing her to stop. The woman froze, mid-stride, eyes wide with raw shock. The girl nearly stumbled as the sudden halt jerked her back. Mark closed the distance in seconds, hand raised. "Do not move." The crowd erupted into whispers, and phones lifted like a forest of glowing screens. Some gasped. Others stood frozen. Rex stood inches from the woman, chest-heaving stance unyielding. His eyes were locked onto her, like he could see right through the surface of her fear. The little girl slowly turned toward Mark again. Her entire body shook. This time, she didn't mouth the words. She whispered them. "Please, help us." Mark felt the world narrow to that single plea. Rex had known long before any of them. Something was terribly dangerously wrong. And the truth was seconds away from breaking open. The terminal seemed to hold its breath as Rex stood rigid, blocking the woman's escape. The sharp echo of his bark still vibrated through the air, blending with the shocked murmurs rising around them. Mark's pulse hammered beneath his uniform, but his voice stayed calm. Calm, in the way only officers who faced danger learned to be. "Ma'am," Mark said firmly, "step away from the child." The woman didn't move. Her chest rose and fell, with uneven breaths. Her eyes darted like a trapped animal searching for any possible exit. She hugged the little girl closer, but it wasn't the embrace of a mother protecting her child. It was tight, almost possessive. Desperate. "I told you we're late for our train," she snapped, forcing her voice into something that was supposed to sound controlled. "You're scaring my children," Rex growled, low and deliberate. The muscles along his back rippled beneath his vest as he took a single step closer, tail-stiff ears flat in warning. His instincts were screaming, and Mark knew better than to ignore them. "Everyone stand back," Mark called to the growing crowd. Several people obeyed immediately. Others continued filming, raising their phones a little higher. A bubble of uneasy silence formed around the confrontation, the energy so taut it felt like the air might snap. The girl took a tiny step backward, pressing herself against Rex's side. It wasn't fear, Mark saw it instantly. It was trust. She gravitated toward the only creature in the room who had understood her silent cry. "Hey," Mark said softly, lowering himself to be at her eye level. "Are you okay?" The woman yanked the girl back sharply. Don't talk to her." Rex let out a warning bark that shook the nearby windows. The woman froze instantly. Mark straightened. Enough was enough. "Ma'am," he said, voice steady, "I need you to put your bag on the inspection table." Now, her breath caught. A flash of pure panic crossed her face. "No," she said, quickly stepping back. "You have no authority to Mom." Mark cut in. "This is a security checkpoint in a public transit facility. My partner is reacting strongly. That alone is enough cause." "That dog is out of control," she cried. But her voice cracked, not with anger, but fear. For a split second, Mark saw the truth flicker in her eyes. She wasn't scared of Rex because she thought he would bite. She was scared of what he had already sensed. "Put the bag down," Mark repeated. Her hand trembled violently as she hugged the black handbag against her chest. Mark could practically feel the adrenaline pouring off her. Rex barked again, sharp, urgent. She flinched and stumbled backward. The bag slipped slightly from her arm, and instinctively she clutched it even harder, as though she were hiding something precious or dangerous. Mark raised a hand, signaling a nearby officer to move in. The woman saw the motion in her peripheral vision, and that was when she broke. In a burst of frantic movement, she whirled around, dragging the little girl behind her again, trying to shove through the stunned crowd. "Rex," Mark commanded. The German Shepherd bolted forward with lightning precision. He pivoted in front of her, blocking her escape once more. His stance was solid, immovable. He didn't attack. He simply planted himself like a wall of muscle and loyalty, barking with a force that made everyone within 10 feet jump. The woman froze mid-step, face draining of color. Mark rushed forward, hand gently but firmly removing the girl from her grip. The woman's fingers tightened, but Mark's training was faster. He pulled the child back, safely guiding her behind him. Rex moved instantly to shield her, forming a barrier between the child and the panicked woman. The girl clung to Rex's fur, tears streaking down her cheeks. "Thank you," she whispered, barely audible over the pounding in Mark's ears. "Please don't let her take me." Mark felt something inside him twist tightly. "Ma'am," he said, with icy authority, "put the bag down." This time she obeyed. With shaking hands, she finally set the black handbag onto the security table. Her knees nearly buckled as she stepped back. A second officer approached cautiously. Mark nodded. "Open it." The zipper slid slowly, a soft scraping sound that felt far too loud in the charged silence. The first items inside were ordinary clothes, toiletries, snacks. But Rex stiffened, nostrils flaring. His gaze snapped toward a folded sweater. "Check under that," Mark instructed. The officer lifted the sweater. A small prepaid phone fell out its back, taped shut. No SIM card. Mark's stomach dropped. Rex barked, head-whipping toward the bottom compartment of the bag. "Open it," Mark said. The officer unzipped it carefully. Inside was a stack of documents, multiple passports, dozens of identification cards, different names. One face. The woman's. Mark's jaw clenched. Each document was expertly forged. Business IDs, parent volunteer badges, library cards, even school visitor passes. But every one of them used the same photo. "Ma'am," Mark said slowly, "would you like to explain this?" She pressed a hand over her mouth. Her body shook violently. "It's not what you think," she whispered. Rex growled a deep, throaty rumble that made her flinch. The officer pulled one last object from the bag, a small, unmarked envelope. Inside were photographs. Children, taken from afar as if through a telephoto lens. At playgrounds, near school gates, at parks. Some smiling, some terrified. A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. The woman lunged forward. "Give those back," she screamed. Mark stepped back, shielding the envelope. "That's enough," he snapped. "Don't move." The little girl's voice cracked as she whispered from behind Rex. "She said we were going on vacation, but the other kids, They never came back. And in that instant, the truth crystallized. This was no mother. This was something far darker. And Rex had known all along. The terminal was no longer a travel hub. It had become a crime scene, wrapped in confusion, shock, and fear. Officers began pushing back the crowd securing the area, while several passengers backed away in horror as more photos spilled across the inspection table like a deck of nightmares. The woman who had moments earlier pretended to be a frantic mother now stood trembling, her mask cracked wide open. Her voice trembled as she whispered, "You don't understand. They'll come for me if you," Rex barked again, cutting her off. The sound echoed like a final verdict. Mark signaled 2 officers. "Take her to holding." Now, they moved in, but the woman tried to pull away, grasping at the scattered photographs. "Please," she begged. "You don't know what you're doing. I had no choice." Her cries dissolved into sobs as the officers cuffed her. The entire terminal watched in stunned silence. Rex stayed planted beside the little girl, tail stiff, posture protective. Mark crouched in front of her, keeping his voice soft and warm. "Sweetheart, you're safe now. No one is going to take you away." The girl wiped her cheeks shakily. "She told me. She told all of us that she was taking us to see our families again. But," her tiny fingers pointed at the photos on the table, "that's them," she whispered. "The other kids." Mark swallowed hard. "What happened to them?" The girl's mouth quivered. They never came back." The weight of her words hit him like a blow. Mark stood his jaw tight. Another officer approached him. "We found more IDs in a hidden pocket," he said quietly. "All different names. All her." Mark nodded grimly. "She's been posing as guardian for multiple children and transporting them," the officer added, "likely across state lines." Rex growled softly, pacing once before settling beside the girl again. "Let's get her somewhere safe," Mark murmured. A female officer led the little girl toward a quieter corner to speak with a social worker who had hurried over from the administration wing. Rex followed closely, refusing to leave her side. As soon as the girl was safely away, Mark took a breath and turned his attention back to the inspection table. The documents, phones, and photographs were already being tagged and bagged by investigators. One officer held up a small folded sheet. "You'll want to see this." Mark took it. It was a handwritten list. Children's names. Next to each name, dates. Locations. Some crossed out. Some not. His blood ran cold. "Dear God," he muttered. Before he could speak further, his radio crackled to life. "Officer Mark, bring the suspect to the station. We need immediate fingerprint and facial recognition cross-checks. This may be bigger than we thought." Bigger. That hardly scratched the surface. At the police station, the station was buzzing by the time they arrived. Dana Voss, that was the name that finally popped on the database, sat in an interrogation room, hands trembling, mascara streaking down her face. She looked small now, stripped of authority, stripped of lies. Mark stood in observation, watching through the two-way mirror as detectives questioned her. Her voice cracked. "You don't understand. They would have killed me if I didn't help." "Who?" the detective asked. Dana shook her head violently. "If I tell you, they'll kill the children left." Mark's chest tightened. Children left. He turned to the lead investigator. "Tell me that's not what it sounds like." The detective sighed. "We ran her prints. She's tied to a trafficking network spanning 3 states. She recruits and transports. The kids vanish after she hands them off. And the girl Lily Mark asked, she was reported missing 3 weeks ago." Mark's stomach churned. He looked down at Rex, who sat beside him, silently watching. "You knew," Mark whispered. "You knew she wasn't safe." Rex blinked, tail thumping once against the floor. The investigator stepped closer, lowering his voice. "That dog saved lives today. More than you know. If that woman had boarded a train, we might never have seen Lily again. Or any of the kids she was scheduled to take next. Mark exhaled slowly, overwhelmed by the magnitude of what they had uncovered. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't an isolated incident. This was a gateway into something far darker. And thanks to Rex, they had stopped the next chapter before it began. The police station hummed with urgency, every hallway alive with movement, detectives hurrying between offices, radios crackling with updates, printers spitting out reports as fast as hands could grab them. Somewhere deep inside that organized chaos sat Dana Voss, the woman in the blue coat stripped of her confidence and surrounded by the truth she'd tried so hard to outrun. Mark stood outside the interrogation room, arms folded tightly across his chest. Through the two-way mirror, he watched as Donna sat slumped in a metal chair, fingers trembling shoulders, shaking with every shallow breath she took. Her previously composed demeanor had disintegrated completely. Now she looked like someone who'd realized the walls were finally closing in. Beside Mark, Rex lay in a sphinx-like position, alert, despite the long and emotional morning. His amber eyes never left Dana's figure through the glass. It was as if he was reading her body language, the tremors in her hands, the rise and fall of her chest, absorbing everything. A senior investigator approached, holding a thick manila folder. "We have her full profile," he said grimly. "And it's worse than expected." Mark tensed. How bad? The investigator opened the folder and spread the documents across the viewing counter. Her real name is Dana Voss. She's been using at least 8 aliases across 3 states. Every ID we found in her bag. Fake. She's been on a federal watch list for almost a year. Mark felt his chest tighten. "What for?" "Child trafficking," the investigator answered. The words dropped like lead. "Recruitment transport delivery. She specializes in moving kids across state lines, using false family identities. Sometimes posing as a mother, other times as an aunt or foster guardian." Mark swallowed hard, his jaw clenching. He looked down at Rex, who remained firm and steady beside him, and Lily. The investigator flipped to another page. Reported missing 3 weeks ago. Her parents have been searching nonstop. Posters, social media, local news, everything. Mark closed his eyes for a moment. 3 weeks? That woman, the investigator added, nodding toward Dana through the glass, was her last point of contact before she disappeared. A wave of anger surged through Mark so strongly he had to steady himself. Rex sensed it, his ears lowered slightly, his nose nudging Mark's leg as if reminding him to breathe. Inside the interrogation room, Dana suddenly slammed her palms against the table, startling the detectives seated across from her. "You don't understand," she cried. "I didn't want to do any of this. They forced me. They said if I didn't bring the kids, they'd." One detective leaned forward calmly. "Who's they?" Dana shook her head wildly, tears spilling down her cheeks. "I can't tell you. If I talk, if I even say their names, they'll come for me. They'll come for the children left." Mark's eyes snapped open. Children left. As in more victims, the lead detective in the room maintained his composure. "Dana kids' lives are at stake. If there are others, she'll kill them," Dana screamed, her voice cracking. "Or worse. They'll disappear, and you'll never see them again." Mark whispered. "We're dealing with a woman at the top." The investigator beside him nodded grimly. "The network Dana works for is rumored to be run by a female trafficker. Highly organized, extremely protective of her anonymity. Dana's just a courier." Inside the room, Dana crumpled back into her chair. "I didn't have a choice," she whispered. "If you knew what they've done to people who failed them." Rex let out a soft but tense growl, as if responding to her confession. Mark turned toward the investigator. "What about the other children on her list? The ones not crossed out?" "We're checking every name right now," the man replied. but the phone found in her bag may help. It's a one-way communication device used for check-ins. We pulled the GPS logs. They show repeated pings near an industrial district outside the city. Mark's pulse jumped. She was transporting children there, most likely. The investigator snapped the folder shut. Whatever they used that building for, it's still active. A deep dread settled into Mark's stomach. He looked at the mirror again, Dana sobbing detectives pushing gently but firmly for information. He had seen countless suspects in interrogation rooms, but this woman, she wasn't hardened like the others. She was terrified of someone much worse. Rex shifted his weight, ears perking sharply. His gaze intensified, locked onto Dana, as if he sensed a shift in her emotions. Inside, one detective spoke gently. "Dana, we can protect you, but you need to help us protect those children." Dana wiped her eyes with shaking hands. "You can't protect me. You can't protect any of them. You don't know what she's capable of. Try us," the detective said. Silence stretched heavy as concrete. Then finally, in a voice barely above a whisper, Dana spoke. "There's a shipment tonight." Mark's heart stopped. "She's moving the remaining children tonight." Dana continued, her eyes unfocused with fear. "If they get taken from that warehouse, you'll never find them again. They'll vanish forever." Mark and the investigator exchanged a quick, urgent glance. "Coordinates," the detective instructed calmly. Where Dana hesitated, her lips trembled. Her eyes flicked toward the mirror, toward Mark and Rex standing behind it. He knew she whispered, staring directly where Rex sat. "The dog knew before any of you did. They said animals can sense fear. But he saw it. He saw me." Rex pressed his paw forward as if responding to her through the glass. Dana broke. Tears burst from her eyes as she finally rattled off an address, a remote location on the outskirts of the city. A zone filled with abandoned warehouses no one bothered to patrol anymore. The moment the detectives confirmed the location, chaos ignited. Commands echoed, officers mobilized, radios blared updates. Tactical gear was distributed. The entire station transformed from routine operation to emergency deployment. Mark buckled his vest, adrenaline already pumping through his veins. Rex stood tall, ready, energized by the urgency in the room. The investigator ran up to them. "We don't have much time. The GPS logs show movement. If we're lucky, we can intercept before they relocate." Mark clipped Rex's leash and leaned close. "You ready, partner?" Rex let out a sharp, determined bark. The convoy assembled in the lot outside, sirens off, engines rumbling with restrained fury. Mark opened the back door of the lead vehicle. Rex hopped in instantly. As Mark climbed in, the commander's voice boomed over the comms units. "We move in 5. Children's lives are on the line." For a moment, Mark looked back at the station, at the window of the interrogation room, where Dana now sat, silently defeated. Then he turned toward Rex. "You heard her," he whispered. "There are more kids out there, and we're going to bring them home." Rex nudged his arm once, steady, loyal, resolute. And as the convoy rolled out into the night, red and blue lights flickering faintly in the darkness, Mark knew one thing with absolute certainty. This wasn't just a rescue mission. This was a race against time, and Rex was ready to lead the way. The convoy rolled into the outskirts of the industrial district, a maze of abandoned warehouses swallowed by darkness and silence. The night air felt colder here, thicker, as if the buildings themselves were holding their breath. Mark stepped out of the vehicle, feeling gravel crunch under his boots. Rex jumped out beside him, tail stiff, posture alert. His nose lifted to the wind, reading scents no human could ever detect. Flashlights clicked on one by one, beams slicing through the shadows. Officers spread out in tight formation, sweeping corners and rusted fences. The only sounds were quiet footsteps, the hum of radios, and Rex's steady breaths. "GPS signal stopped somewhere around here," the lead detective whispered. pointing at a large, windowless structure ahead. Rex's ears snapped forward. Mark felt the leash pulled gentle at first, then urgent. "You smell something, buddy," he whispered. Rex didn't wait. His body suddenly surged with purpose as he followed an invisible trail across cracked pavement, weaving past debris and broken pallets. Mark kept pace, trusting the dog implicitly. Rex halted near a heavy metal door, chained shut with an old padlock. He pressed his nose against the bottom, sniffed, then let out a deep, guttural growl. Mark froze. There, beneath the faint rustle of wind, he heard it. A muffled sound. A whimper. A child. "Here," Mark shouted. "They're inside." Officers rushed over. One grabbed a crowbar, while another prepared bolt cutters. The metal screeched as the lock snapped free. Rex barked, pacing anxiously, as the officers threw the door open. A beam of light swept inside. The breath left Mark's lungs. Huddled in the corner of the dim concrete room were 5 children, disheveled, exhausted clothes, dirty eyes wide with terror. One clutched a torn blanket. Another held a shoe 2 sizes too big, as if it were the only thing they had left. They stared at the sudden burst of light like they weren't sure whether to run or cry. Mark stepped forward slowly. "It's okay," he said softly, lowering his voice to a whisper meant only for them. "You're safe now. We're here to help." A little boy crawled forward, first tears streaking down his dirt-smeared cheeks. Are you the police?" Mark nodded. "Yes, buddy. You're going home." Rex approached, carefully lowering his head so he wouldn't scare them. His tail gave a gentle wag, slow, reassuring. The children's fear wavered. One girl reached out hesitantly, touching Rex's fur with trembling fingers. "He found us," she whispered, as if stating a miracle. Mark's chest tightened. "Yeah," he murmured, voice thick. He always does. Officers began ushering the children out, gently wrapping them in blankets, guiding them past the ruined door and into the safety of the waiting team. Radio calls erupted behind them, children secured, requesting medical support. Notify family units. In the midst of it all, Rex stood tall, watching each child carefully as they stepped into the light one by one, rescued before they could disappear forever. And for the first time that night, Mark allowed himself to breathe. They had found them, just in time. The relief of rescuing the children lasted only seconds. A sudden roar shattered the night, the unmistakable sound of an engine igniting. Mark spun toward the far end of the warehouse lot just in time to see headlights flare to life behind a cluster of rusted containers. A black SUV lunged forward, tires screeching violently across the gravel. "They're trying to escape," an officer shouted. Before Mark could react, Rex was already in motion. The German Shepherd bolted toward the fleeing vehicle, his paws beating against the pavement like thunder. "Rex, go, Mark," yelled, sprinting after him. The SUV fishtailed wildly, clipping an abandoned dumpster and sending metal crashing across the alley. The driver swerved, desperate to lose the pursuing officers. But Rex was faster, focused, fearless, unstoppable. Mark shouted into his radio between breaths. "Unit 3, suspect vehicle heading east. Repeat." Heading east. Flashing lights whipped around the corner as backup units joined the chase. The SUV sped down a narrow service road, bouncing over potholes, its rear bumper dragging sparks across the concrete. Rex closed the distance with terrifying speed. Every muscle in his body coiled with purpose, his breath sharp and steady. "Come on, buddy," Mark panted just a little more. The SUV swerved again, this time too sharply. The back window rolled halfway down. A man leaned out, shouting something unintelligible as he tried to shake the dog off his trail. But Rex didn't flinch. With a final burst of power, he lunged, his jaws locked onto the driver's sleeve through the open window. The driver screamed, jerking the wheel in panic. The SUV spun out, violently skidding sideways before slamming into a chain-link fence with a sickening crunch. Steam hissed from under the hood, smoke rising in faint curls. Mark reached the vehicle seconds later, drawing his weapon. "Police, don't move!" The driver stumbled out, clutching his arm where Rex had bitten through the fabric. He tried to run, but Rex planted himself between the man and the open alley, growling a deep, commanding sound that froze the suspect in place. Officers swarmed in, tackling the man to the ground and securing him in cuffs. As they hauled him up, the suspect spat angrily. "You think you've stopped it? You have no idea who you're dealing with." Mark stepped closer, voice cold. "Maybe not. But you won't hurt another child tonight." The suspect's defiance faded when Rex padded forward, eyes locked onto him like a silent promise. Mark knelt beside his partner, brushing a hand over Rex's neck. "You did it again, buddy," he whispered. Rex panted softly, tail giving a slow, victorious wag. In the dim alley, lit by flashing red and blue lights, there was no doubt this chase was over. And justice had teeth. The warehouse district moments earlier drowning in tension and adrenaline now echoed with the sounds of relief. Sirens pulsing softly, radios buzzing with updates, and hurried footsteps replaced by calmer, steadier movements. Officers guided the rescued children toward waiting ambulances, wrapping them carefully in thick blankets. The night's cold air seemed gentler, now softened by the fragile safety restored. Mark stood near the command zone chest, rising and falling with deep, heavy breaths. He watched paramedics kneel beside the children, shining lights into their eyes, offering warm cocoa in paper cups. Some of the kids trembled. Others stared silently, their expressions hollow from fear and exhaustion. But they were alive, and they were safe. Rex sat loyally at Mark's side, his fur still damp with sweat and mist, his posture tall and alert. He kept his eyes fixed on the children, tracking their every move, as if counting them, making sure none slipped away. The dog's protective instinct hadn't lessened for even a second. Nearby, Lily stood with a social worker wrapped in a foil blanket. Her eyes, no longer wide with fear, followed Rex from across the lot. Every few moments, she brushed a hand across her face, still overwhelmed, still processing everything she had survived. Then she saw Mark looking her way. The girl hesitated for a moment, before taking a few timid steps forward. The social worker allowed her, watching closely. Lily approached Mark and Rex, her expression softening with gratitude. "Hi, Mark," said, gently crouching to meet her height. "How are you holding up?" Lily didn't answer right away. She looked down at Rex, who lowered his head to her level. Slowly, she reached out and wrapped her small arms around his neck. "He saved us," she whispered into Rex's fur. "He heard me, when no one else did." Mark swallowed hard, emotion tightening his throat. "Yeah," he said, quietly. "He hears a lot more than we do." Before he could say more, a shout rose in the distance. Parents arriving. Mark turned. A man and woman were rushing across the taped-off area, escorted by detectives. Their faces were drained eyes, red bodies shaking with hope and fear colliding all at once. Lily froze. The moment her mother spotted her, everything collapsed into raw emotion. "Lily," she cried, stumbling forward. The girl let out a small gasp before breaking into a desperate run. Her father dropped to his knees just in time to catch her. The family folded into each other's arms, rapping, shaking, crying in a mix of anguish and relief. Officers nearby paused quietly, some turning away to give them privacy, others wiping their own eyes. Mark stood still, letting the moment wash over him. Beside him, Rex watched the reunion with calm, steady eyes, eyes that had witnessed darkness, but also knew how to recognize light when it finally broke through. Lily pulled away from her parents suddenly and ran back to Rex. She knelt beside him, placing her hands gently on both sides of his face. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice trembling but sincere. "You're my hero." Rex blinked slowly, leaning into her touch. Mark couldn't help the faint smile pulling at his lips. He rested his hand on Rex's back. He hears that he said softly. He always does. The investigators approached Mark, handing him a thick folder of collected evidence. The network's broken one said quietly, "Your dog and your instincts saved more lives than you know." Mark looked down at Rex, muddy tired, but proud. "He just followed the truth," Mark replied. Rex's tail thumped once against the ground. The night had been long, brutal, overwhelming. But in that moment, bathed in the flashing lights of rescue vehicles, surrounded by people reunited with hope, Mark realized something simple and profound. Heroes came in many forms. Some carried badges, and some walked on four paws. Morning light crept slowly over the city, painting the skyline in soft gold. The chaos of the long night had faded into a gentle hush, leaving behind only the faint echoes of what had happened. At the front steps of the police station, Mark sat quietly, elbows resting on his knees, exhaustion settling deep into his bones. But it wasn't a heavy exhaustion. It was the kind that came after something deeply important had been set right. Beside him, Rex sat tall and alert, as if refusing to rest until everyone else had. His fur was still damp, his breathing steady, eyes sweeping the station yard with calm vigilance. The breeze tugged gently at his vest, the patch reading "Police" glinting in the morning sun. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. They simply existed in the silence, partners who had just walked through darkness together and brought several children back into the light. "You know," Mark murmured, glancing at Rex, "if I hadn't trusted you back there, if I'd told you to heal, we might have walked right past her." Rex turned his head, meeting Mark's gaze with the same quiet certainty he'd carried all night. No bark, no wag, just understanding, as if to say, "You listened. That's what mattered." Mark chuckled softly. "Guess you're the real detective between us." The sound of a car door closing drew their attention. Lily stepped out, her pink jacket glowing in the sunlight. She held something small in her hand, a metal tag. Rex's old K9 badge, the one Mark had slipped to her before she left with her family. Lily approached shyly, her parents watching from a few steps away. She knelt beside Rex and held up the tag. "I'm going to keep this forever," she said, her voice bright and steady. "So I never forget what you did." Rex blinked slowly, leaning his head into her small shoulder. His tail brushed softly against the concrete, a gentle thump-thump of affection. Mark placed a hand on Lily's back. "You don't have to forget," he told her. "You're part of his story now, and he's part of yours." Lily hugged Rex one last time before running back to her parents. Mark watched them drive away, warmth settling into his chest. The station yard fell quiet again. Mark looked down at Rex. "You don't just protect lives, buddy," he whispered. "You change them." Rex leaned against him, eyes soft, heart steady. And as the camera pulled back, the morning sun spilled over them, officer and dog framed in gold. Sometimes heroes don't wear capes. Sometimes they walk on four paws. And that brings our story to a close. A night filled with fear, courage, and a hero who didn't need words to save lives. If this story touched you or made you believe just a little more in the quiet heroes around us, then don't forget to like this video. It truly helps the story reach more people. And hey, we're on a small mission of our own. If you enjoyed this journey, consider hitting the subscribe button to help us reach our very first milestone, 1,000 subscribers. Your support helps us keep telling these powerful, heartwarming stories. Thank you for watching, thank you for being here. And while you're waiting for the next story, we've already prepared 2 more videos for you, right here on the screen. Just click on one of them and let this emotional journey continue with you.